Hey everyone, this is the second video in the tutorial series where we're talking about Unity, and in this video we are basically going to open up and create a very small game with a couple of objects to get us used to the Unity environment. So the first thing I'm going to do is go to my Unity folder, which is in my applications folder. I'll go ahead and open up Unity. When I do that, it's going to ask me, do I want to use a project that I've been working on, or should I create a new one? And so I'm going to create a new one. When I create a new one, it asks me where I want to put it. I'm going to put it on my desktop. And for right now, I'm just going to call it New Unity Project. And it's going to be in 3D. And I'm going to go ahead and create the project. When I do that, what it will do is it will bring up the generic default window for Unity. It will also create some folders on my hard disk. So if I go over to my hard disk and I look at my desktop, it's created a new folder here. I'm going to move it up here to keep it kind of organized. And inside of that folder will be 4 separate folders: Assets, Library, Project Settings, and Temp. The folder that you're going to use most often is this Assets folder, and we'll get to that in a few minutes. That's where you'll put all your music assets and sound assets, and you can actually create folders with inside of the Assets folder. So let's get back to our project. I'm going to go over to Unity, and I'm going to start taking a look at it. Now, there are 2 objects in my scene: a main camera and a directional light. That's how Unity starts, and if I want to focus on the main camera, what I can do is double click on it and it will focus on just that object, or just the directional light, I can double click on that. So any object in the hierarchy of my scene I can double click on. I can move directly towards it. If I ever get lost, I can just double click. It will also bring up the properties for the individual object that I select. So the directional light has various various parameters, including the color of the light, the intensity, etc., shadows. It also has a position and space. And then my main camera, when I click on that, has several different parameters as well. We're not going to adjust any of those right now. We're just going to create some very simple objects in our game. So let's go ahead and do that. The first thing I want to do is create something for us to walk on. I'm going to basically create a very simple game with just a couple objects and a character that can walk around. So I go to the Game Object menu. I choose 3D Object because that's what we want to create. We're in a 3D world. I'm going to go ahead and create a plane. Now, if you remember some basic geometry, a plane is a flat surface that basically goes in all directions infinitely. Well, in Unity, it doesn't go infinitely in all directions. It basically acts as a platform that we can stand on, and it has a size, and we're actually going to increase the size. Right now, it's 1 by 1 by 1. That's the scale of it. But I'm going to increase it across the x-axis and make it 10 by 1 by 1. It means I have like a long platform for me to walk on. And if I start my game, we should look at the main camera next. My main camera, you can see that this is the camera preview of what it's seeing. Right now it's sitting at the same height as the plane. So if I move it up a little bit like this, we should be able to see the plane. You see the plane come into existence in my camera preview. And that's helpful because, by the way, if I go underneath the plane, it becomes invisible. And that's actually a function of most 3D engines will only render from one side, either the top side or the outside of an object. But if you're within an object, will actually be invisible when you go into it. Sometimes you see that in games. It's not too important for right now. Just know that if you're underneath it, you won't see it, like here. But if we bring the camera above, the camera is now looking and we can see the actual plane itself. And I can actually move the camera forward. The plane will come forward all the way until we sort of go past it and stuff like that. All right, now we need a character for our game. Unity comes with a bunch of pre-packaged assets for us, and we can load those by going up to the Assets menu, choosing Import Package. We're going to load some characters, like so. And what it's going to do is it's going to decompress that, because it's compressed it when you download it. And it's going to ask us, are you sure you want to import all these things? And I'm just going to hit yes. Yes, I'm sure. because we're not going to use everything in here, but we are going to use the we are going to use one of the characters. The third person character is what we're going to actually use. So let's go ahead and import all of this. Takes a few seconds depending on the speed of your machine and your hard drive. And we'll wait for that to go. And then I want to show you what it's actually imported, because it's actually copied those files from a default location into the assets folder. And you'll see in the assets folder down here, we've actually created 2 new folders with all that data that we've imported. So if I go back to the Finder and I look inside my Unity project folder, inside of assets, I'll see those 2 folders. And then inside of editor, I'll see that. And inside of standard assets, I'll see characters. When I go back to Unity, I'll also be able to go inside of editor and I'll see that folder, or standard assets, and I'll see the characters folder. I actually do want the characters folder, so I'm going to double click on that, and I'll see first person controller, rollerball, third person. I want to do third person just for this example. In a later example, we'll probably use the first person controller to see how that works. I want to see the character in the scene. So when I double click third person controller, these are all the things that make up that third person character. I'm going to go into prefab. These are prefabricated objects. And I'll see third person here. It's a third person controller. And I can actually drag him out onto the staging area or the scene area like so. So now I can see him in the scene. In fact, if I play my game using the play button up here, I should see him in my scene. And actually, he's got a bunch of scripts on him that already make him walk around. So I can use the A key to move him left, the D key to move him right, and actually I can have him walk off the platform like this, and then he'll fall into space. All right, so that's great, but you know what? I want the camera to follow him around. So in order to do that, I can pick up the camera, I can select it, and drag him to the third person controller. And that way he becomes part of the third person controller himself. Now check this out. When I play the game, when I move the character, so does the character himself. So I'm using the A and D keys to kind of move from left to right. And then when I go forward, I can move him around like this. Now I want to move him a little, I want to move my camera a little bit closer into my character. Make sure, like over the shoulder view is kind of what I'm looking for. And so I'll go back here because this is basically a prefab object that I've added my main camera to. I can actually go in here and adjust my camera to a relative position of where my character is. So I'm actually moving it up and down using these arrows. If I pull one of these, I'm actually using the X, Y, and Z planes to move in closer. So if I want kind of an over the shoulder view like so, and then start the game, and then I have an over the shoulder view, and he'll move along with me, and now he's moving, or he's moving this way. And if I fall off the edge, remember Unity only will render from one side. So if I go off the edge here and look back, it will the surface will disappear. I'm still falling in space, but remember, objects will only render from one direction. So if you look up at this plane from up underneath, you won't see anything, but from above, you see it. So it's just something to get a little bit used to. So I have a character, and I have the camera attached to that character. I'm going to create 2 objects now. I'm going to create one at this end of the platform and then another at the other end. And in order to do that, I'm just going to create very simple objects. Go up to the Game Object menu, and I can create a 3D object, and I'm going to create a cube. And so that's my cube, and you can see it's a little underneath my plane. I'm going to pull it above the plane so I can see the entire shadow. I'm going to move it all the way down to this end here. Now it's a little small, so I'll increase it to 2 by 2 by 2. That's a little bigger. Maybe 3. Do 3 by 3 by 3. So it's a little bigger, and I want to make sure that's above the plane so it doesn't fall on me. And so that's cool. So I have a big cube at the other end, and I'm going to go to the near end now, and what I'll do is also create another 3D object, and I'll create a sphere. So here's my sphere. Now my sphere I also want to make bigger, so I'll also make that 3 by 3 by 3, and I'll put it at the other end. Now this gets into mouse controls, and it might be a little weird. So in order for me to kind of change my viewpoint, I have these controls up here, which allow me to pick up an object, to move an object, to rotate around the world or rotate an object. And I'm going to go to here, and I'm going to right click, and then I'm going to spin around the world. So I'm right clicking with my mouse. You could do this with a trackpad, but it's really difficult, and I recommend getting just a really simple mouse with 3 buttons on it. When I right click, I also can move into the world using the so the W key will move me into the world, the the S key. So this is W, this is S, I'm moving back, and then A to sort of move left, and D to move right. And I can sort of move into my world a little bit, turn around. I'm all doing this by holding down the right mouse button. And then I picked up the right mouse button, then I can click here and move my sphere all the way down to the end here. So I'm going to play my game, and when I play it, on one end I'll see a sphere, and on the other end I'll see a cube. And then I'll run down to one end. He defaults to run, by the way. He's running, and so now we have a cube at this end. We have a sphere way down at the other end. And actually, if I fall off, this is kind of cool. Remember how I said that you only can see things like the outside of a rendered object? So when I fall off the edge here, I'll get to see the cube fall away. So I fall off. I'll see the cube. Oops, I'm not looking up. So that test didn't work. I have to look up when I do that. But when I fall off, since those objects are rendering from the outside, when I jump off, I should be able to still see the object itself. So let's see if I can do that. Oops. I guess I can't turn in mid-space and see that, but it would render from underneath. All right, so that's a little bit of how to build a very simple, small game. Just to recap, we created a new project. We imported from the Assets menu, we imported a package called Characters. And inside of Characters, we basically had a special kind of character called a third-person controller. In the prefabs, we were able to drag that third-person controller out onto our scene. And I'll double-click here, and we can see him. And then I dragged the main camera onto his body so that when he moved, then our main camera would move around with him. And that's what we did. So in the next tutorial, we're going to start talking about sound objects in a very simple way. All right, save this project. This is the last thing I need you to do. We're going to save our game at this point. And to do that, just go up to File, Save Scene. And when we save our scenes, it's going to ask us where to put it. And we want to put it in the Assets folder, which is good, the default. And that sits within our new Unity project folder. So I'm going to basically just call it, Level 1. And save it. And you can see in my hierarchy here, when I go to the Assets folder, I'll see Level 1. Also, when I go to the Finder, I'll see in the Assets folder, Level 1. It's postfixed appended. It's appended .unity at the end. That's its sort of file nomenclature, almost like its file extension. Whenever you see .unity, that stands for like a level file or a scene file that you then can open. All right, that ends our first tutorial, and we're going to move on to look at how to deal with sounds in our next tutorial.